Episode 273, Smallholdings, Tools and Equipment. This is the Change Underground. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. This week is about the practical, but that does not preclude the need to think critically about decisions, so let's set some definitions. A small holding covers a multitude of options. I was listening to the Tasmanian Country Hour last week, and they were reporting on a small farming event, and one of their speakers had a holding of 100 acres. To me, that's not a small holding, but it is a mindset thing as much as land size. Okay, from the Food and Agriculture Organisation, quote, "There is no unique and unambiguous definition of a small holder. Often scale measured in terms of farm size is used to classify farmers into small and large. For example, a number of analysts classify smallholders based on a threshold of 2 hectares. However, across countries, the distribution of farm sizes depends on a number of agroecological and demographic conditions, as well as economic and technological factors. 2 hectares in an arid region of sub-Saharan Africa do not produce as much as 2 hectares of good quality land in the Black Sea region. In Kenya, classifying as smallholders those farmers who farm land less than 2 hectares and adding them up would nearly result in the entire arable sector. In other countries, such as Nicaragua, farms smaller than 2 hectares would be really small." End quote. To my mind, a small holding is as much a mindset, there's more of a mindset than a measurement. The key part of small holding for me is the integration of animals with plants, a microcosm of biomimicry. Unless we are buying in large amounts of fertility, a small holding will head towards desertification without animals. A bold statement, I know, but I think this has been proven since the dawn of agriculture. Salt plains of southern Iraq, the now arid region where the wheat-barley complex arose, it's known as the Fertile Crescent in inverted commas, the American Dust Bowl of the 1930s and the dust storms occurring today all point to this outcome. Now, it may not happen in our lifetime, but it could, and so we need to avoid desertification as much as possible. So if we take the idea of a small holding being a microcosm of nature, we will need to engineer complexity to achieve a productive stability. Biomimicry must be our watchword. And this can be a painfully enlightening process. I had 2 strips of land, 10 by 25 metres, separated by an alleyway. On the right, it was pigged over and regrown pasture, a mixture of legumes, clovers, subclovers and vetch, intergrowing with broadleaf plants like dock and plantain, and all these within a matrix of several grass species, both annual and perennial. On the left of the alleyway is the spelt patch. Not exactly a monoculture, but pretty damn close. Some perennial grasses poking up between the rows, a few brassicas, known locally here as mustardweed, and the docks and plantains. These are struggling to find light as the spelt produces large amounts of organic matter. Further down the alleyway behind the spelt, I have the oats, which are producing a monumental amount of organic matter, and the alternative species are smothered. These oats will be slashed after I've oversown them with buckwheat, so they just become organic matter. The biodiversity difference between the pasture and the cereals slapped me in the face one afternoon, so I stood in the fields contemplating and listening. Lots of photosynthesis occurring on both sides of the alleyway, but the differences were stark. To produce food for humans, the cereals will return more, especially on a small-sized area. Ducks and chooks can and do graze the pasture, but food return favours the cereal. To start the cereal patches takes energy, human or mechanical. Straight lines of plants are not natural, but they are efficient-ish. I diverted down this description to highlight the choices we need to make when we're managing a small holding. I chose to use a walk-behind tractor with a minimal till rotary hoe and a sickle bar mower. Once the cereal patch was prepared for the seed, I used a handheld hoe to form the ridges and furrows. I hand sowed into the furrows and then used the hoe to split the ridges and cover the grains. And to harvest the spelt, I'll be using a Korean sickle. And to harvest the organic matter of the oats, the sickle bar mower. I have chosen deliberately not to grow market garden vegetables because they are of little interest to me. Also, I'm not interested in that level of manual labour when I've got another job to go to. Instead, I chose to focus on small-scale cereals and surround the patches with perennials. Rosemaries, dwarf, crab apples, and any number of other things to build diversity and productivity. And tools needed for these hedgerows are basically just pruning saws and secateurs. The chop and drop idea. All very minimal because the animals provide the power above and beyond the photosynthesis. The pigs, coming to the end of their time with us, have turned pasture species, windfall apples and all the non-pork household organic matter into meat, manure and soil fertility. The ducks work on the snail and slug issues, as well as grazing the pastures and aerating them with their bills, and the chooks act as a clean-up team after everyone else. Once the pigs retire, podcast footnote, when I say retire, I mean I'll be killing them, gutting them, hanging and butchering them. Mrs. Change Underground and I will then make bacon, ham and sausages. All life ends in death. From what I can see through my own observations and readings, there are two interpretations of life on this planet. One, it is a place of suffering before moving on to a promised land. And two, the world is a promised land we just need to understand and live with. From these two different understandings of spirituality, from the former one life, one test, and then a life in an ethereal paradise, from the latter, many lives either as a soul or as chemicals, cycling through the biosphere. Happiness later, and the earth is a tool for our use versus wonder and joy in each life because we find ourselves here now. Either system has death in it, there's no doubt about that, and it's always as an end product of life. Plants, microbes, fungi and other animals will eat us when we're dead. Everything eats something else while we're alive. And this includes us. Now, Jake and Elwood, the two pigs, have lived a life out in the fresh air, eating pastures, sleeping under trees in summer, have run and frolicked with me and will be killed with one bullet to the brain, each. And I'm at peace with this. I'm not at peace with pigs or any other animal, for that matter, being confined and then marched off with thousands of their kind to be processed, in inverted commas, in a conveyor belt of unfeeling death. I do not enjoy the act of killing another animal, but I make sure it is done as quickly and as pain-free as possible. Animals are killed at different places across our holding so that no one place has a smell of death, and the blood resulting is returned to as much of the soil as possible. Birth, life, death, humane and with dignity and gratitude. End podcast footnote. Once the pigs are killed, butchered and preserved, we, the soil, the plants and the humans, are going to benefit from a new species. But that is a choice for the future. So to tools. Use animals where you can. Work out what you'll be producing, and this informs everything else. Select the simplest tools you can and spend money for quality. And don't forget to sell what you find you don't need as a tool. Above all, keep learning. Your mind is your primary tool. So if you're thinking about or you're even ready to take a leap into growing your own food, go over to the website worldorganicnews.com and click on the free ebook tab at the top of the page where you can obtain a copy of the Change Underground No-Dig Gardening System ebook. And don't forget to use the Facebook group if you want to ask questions or just follow along. That's Change Underground podcast group, link in the show notes. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back next week.